Does it feel like you keep getting caught in the same emotional traps with chronic fatigue? Over 5 years of working one to one with CFS clients, I've noticed that these are the ones most people can fall into from time to time. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through which traps to watch for and how spotting them early can help you protect your emotional well being. So, here's a pattern that many of us fall into, and it's something we can learn in childhood to keep us safe. And if we're not careful, it can become a really significant emotional trap. So, I want you to imagine that your emotional state is this pot, because every time you say yes to something you truly don't want to do, you're essentially turning up the heat. On the outside, you appear calm, but on the inside, you're feeling pressure, not just from what you've agreed to, but from the resentment that builds up inside when you neglect your own needs. Because this drive to keep everyone happy, it can add significantly to your stress levels, especially when your energy reserves are already low. So for some, it can lead them to continually take on too much or even tolerate demands from people that simply aren't what you're able to give. And that's why understanding how this impacts you can be the crucial first step. So let's explore how you begin to shift this pattern, shall we? Can you recall a time that you agreed to something and you later regretted it, or perhaps you didn't say no when you wanted to? Think about where in your life you could be putting others' needs above your own. If you do, maybe the next time somebody asks something of you, instead of immediately saying yes, I encourage you to stop for a moment and practice saying something like, let me get back to you, or I'm not sure, I need to think about it. That brief pause can be incredibly powerful because it starts to break the automatic habit of saying yes to everything. So maybe this week, try this out and notice what happens. You might find you feel a sense of lightness and greater connection to what you really need. Next, I'm going to show you how to avoid giving your emotional bandwidth away to other people, even without them even realizing it. So when I was struggling with CFS, I avoided socializing because I thought it would make me feel worse. But then I noticed this pattern. If friends had planned to come and visit, I'd feel anxious for days leading up to it. I was worried about how I'd cope if I crashed. So by visit day, I already felt emotionally tired and stressed. And then when they came over, my mind was somewhere else. I watched the clock. I worried about how I'd get them to leave if I started to feel bad. And then they'd leave and I'd feel annoyed with myself, annoyed with them, and more lonely because the whole thing felt like it cost me more than it really gave. And you see, it wasn't the visits that were the problem. No, it was my lack of boundaries. They'd always been weak, but in a health crisis, they just got even harder to keep in place because trying to enforce those boundaries made me feel anxious. So, how do you start reinforcing your boundaries to stop this cycle? Well, many people with conditions like chronic fatigue don't skip social get togethers because they don't want company. Of course, we do. Is because without boundaries in place, the experience just ends up being too emotionally draining. And that's why a simple social script can be helpful, because for some people, it gives them back some control without all of the guilt that goes with it. These scripts can also reduce the anxiety of being caught off guard and help us to contemplate socializing again without all the mental stress and worry that comes with it. So, what makes a good social script? Well, it's short, natural, and it's easy to say. It's not defensive, and we're not begging here. It just states your needs clearly. For example, thanks. I've had a great time, but I need to go now. Or we've got something else on tonight, so we'll have to wrap up by 5 today. Okay, so this next one really is the result of people pleasing and leaky boundaries. But if you don't spot it early, it can turn into a long-term emotional drain, which might leave you feeling stuck. Are you the person who's always listening to your friends' problems, but they never seem that interested in what you've got going on? Look, I know it feels nice to be needed, particularly when living with fatigue can feel so lonely, but being an emotional sponge for everyone else is a dynamic I often see in clients who have grown up in situations where parents leaned on them as children, either physically or emotionally. And that works okay when you're healthy, but when your physical and emotional reserves already feel low because of fatigue, well, that can really quickly become a heavy load. You may find it hard to deal with the demands of listening to somebody who is struggling with something. I mean, that can be draining. But also, it can then lead to a whole host of emotions like resentment and frustration, particularly if you don't feel heard yourself. So, how do we start shifting out of that emotional rock roll without worrying about hurting anyone else's feelings? Well, if this sounds like your default, the first step could simply be noticing where in your life you're acting like an emotional crutch. Oh, yeah, it is crutch. And also seeing who in your life is leaning on you and perhaps not repaying the favor. We've all got those people. The thing is, relationships thrive when there is a shared give and take. So it's okay to ask yourself if certain relationship dynamics are actually helping you right now. That's perfectly fine, because this may be a time in your life when you genuinely need time and space to focus on your own needs rather than constantly being there for someone else. Now, some people might label this as selfish, and I thought it was. There are times in life, like now, when you're dealing with something like CFS, that it's absolutely okay to protect your emotional energy. Sometimes it can be as simple as not replying to WhatsApp messages quite as quickly as you used to, or you could have a short social script for when you're on a telephone call with somebody who's having a hard time, so that you're not spending hours on the telephone becoming emotionally drained. Taking these small steps can help you really take the fear out of changing this role, because it is a process. Pay attention to how you feel after making a few small adjustments. When you start to lighten your load by not trying to carry everyone else's emotions, you give yourself space, and you might even notice more room for your own thoughts and feelings. So now that we've explored how you could make your relationships more supportive, this next emotional drain could quietly shape your mood far more than you'd expect. So during my CFS journey, I had dental work I thought would help me recover, but it actually made my symptoms worse and created more health problems like I needed anymore. But I remember a week where a filling they'd done fell out, and I just felt so angry that I just couldn't sleep. It took some time, but I finally noticed how these emotions were wearing me down. There are two common ways that people deal with emotions during their CFS journey, both which can be a hard emotional trap to get out of. So many people either replay old problems endlessly, reliving painful emotions, and the other way is to try not to feel them at all. People often fear that their symptoms will flare if they feel emotions. But these habits keep emotions bottled up and can make you feel more stuck and overwhelmed. Because the initial physiological experience of an emotion and the chemical signals which impact the nervous system can actually run their course pretty quickly. And so when we resist this cycle, emotions can stick around and continue impacting us for longer than they really need to. Well, now that you know the impact of not processing your emotions in a healthy way, what should you do? Well, the first step is noticing what you're feeling, what emotions might you be suppressing or focusing on at the moment. And for some people, acknowledging their emotions can start the process of changing their relationship with them. EFT and similar tools can really help. And personally, after years of not allowing myself to cry, I learned connecting with your emotions is a skill that anyone can build, because I was really emotionally shut down. And so every bit of emotional intelligence and resilience you bring into your life, this moves you closer to reclaiming your joy and to feeling closer to the present moment, no matter where you are in life. This next trap is sneaky and it can cause a lot of negative emotion, yet it's completely under our control. But if we leave it unchecked, it can sap us emotionally day after day. So how do you feel that you stack up against your old self right now? I often know when a client is having a hard time taking steps to move forward when they spend a lot of time talking about what they used to be able to do and how their current situation feels compared to that. And this constant comparison to a past version of ourselves can sometimes leave us feeling a bit stuck. It could bring up emotions like grief or frustration, and yes, even a sense of irritation, which, if they hang around, can start to quietly wear us down. Plus, this comparison can also lead us to try out activities that might be a stretch right now, and then we can get disappointed when it doesn't quite work out. Plus, if there's already some fear around activity, comparing ourselves to what we used to do can add a feeling of even greater pressure, sometimes making the boring first steps even harder. So, how do you start actually breaking out of this cycle? Well, even being open to shifting your perspective is a powerful start because this pattern can be really tough to let go of. Next time you find yourself drifting back to the past and what you used to be able to do, just hit that pause for a moment and really notice how that feels. Is this motivating, or does it leave you feeling a lot of pressure or grief? Because there's a big difference there, and seeing it really is the first step. So once you can spot that difference and you've really opened up to a little change, try a simple mindset shift. Accept things as they are right now and really acknowledge this by saying to yourself, that was me then and this is me now. Because letting go of comparison really frees us up to move forward and bring joy into today. And this helps you to discover more about who you are right now instead of staying in those heavy emotions that keep you feeling stuck. Which leads me on to another emotional drain that we have to do every day. It's unavoidable. So imagine every decision you make is like lifting a dumbbell. For most people on a good day, it's a tiny weight. But when you're already drained and you're in that foggy place, the smallest choices can feel impossible or really quite anxiety inducing. The thing is, it's the same decision, but suddenly it feels like that dumbbell is even 10 times heavier. And so when you repeat that over and over, it's not just harder, it can be mentally exhausting. So, how do you stop decisions draining your mental energy? Well, we all have to make decisions, but the big goal here, if this is an issue for you, could be to reduce the unnecessary ones in your day wherever you can. Take a moment to notice other parts of your life where you're constantly making choices that feel mentally draining. And ask yourself, where can I simplify things? And also, when you do need to make a decision, it can be much easier just writing out the pros and cons. Because putting your thoughts down on paper creates a bit of separation and lets you process each point just once so that it doesn't spin around and around in your head. Because when you simplify your daily choices so that they're no longer a burden, you're giving your brain a break. And this frees up capacity for the things that really matter. This week, notice how much lighter you feel when you remove decision clutter from your day. So far, we've covered the emotional drains from our relationships with other people and our connection with the past. But this next one starts with the best intentions. I used to think that the more I read, the closer I'd get to answers. I had a packed Kindle. My YouTube history went on and on. I watched a lot of YouTube. But although I knew a lot, I didn't understand why I was still feeling so emotionally drained and discouraged. Well, sometimes taking in too much information without giving yourself a chance to try things can leave you feeling overwhelmed and confused. It's like stacking up books but never reading one properly. So if you find yourself feeling stuck or overloaded before you go searching for more, it might help to stop for a little while and focus on using a few things that you already know. And after doing that for a couple of weeks, check in with yourself. Do you feel calmer, less overwhelmed? That can be a sign that adding on small things is the way to go. The thing is, we're all different, but many people notice a positive shift when they give themselves space to apply what they've already learnt. This next one is less about what you're doing and knowing and more about what you might be missing. Have you ever noticed that some days just feel lighter, calmer, more relaxed, especially when you've done something fun, even if it's small? You see, it might not just be a coincidence. For many people I see with chronic fatigue, the longer the illness goes on, the less balanced life feels. And so we can end up in something I call the misery cycle, whereby the longer we've had fatigue, the less enjoyable things we have in our life. And it makes sense because fatigue takes our energy away and stops us doing many of the things that we used to enjoy in the past. Then what happens is the more we double down on managing symptoms as our focus, the more overwhelming life starts to feel. So doing things that we enjoy is a bit like the shock absorbers on a car. It doesn't stop us hitting potholes, but without them, every bit of uneven road can feel more painful. So when you strip out joy completely, everyday challenges just feel harder, and that can take a toll on us. And I get it. When you don't feel like yourself, finding something enjoyable can feel impossible. I used to wait for my health to improve before I let myself have any fun. But the truth is, joy isn't a luxury, it's a necessary part of everyone's emotional well being, even and especially when you're dealing with chronic illness. So, what can you do? Well, even the smallest spark of enjoyment can make a difference. In the next video, I'll show you some simple ways to reconnect with what makes you feel good, even if you're not sure what that is right now. I'll see you there.